So, Karen, why don't we just hop right into the deal and the negotiations? Because that was the center or one of the centers of this episode. You and I have both been in negotiations. We've both been in contract negotiations. We've been in lawsuit negotiations. I saw a lot of similarities to all of those, but where do you want to start with the negotiations? At the start?
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's start at the start.
Okay, so the way negotiations work, for those who don't know on this podcast, I say something, and then Karen says something, and then I say something back, and Karen says something back. And that's where we started in this episode. Did that first opening negotiation between Madsen and Kendall and Roman, do you think they were taken aback by his offer for the full company, or were they trying to play chess?
I think they were taken aback somewhat, and some of the later dialogue suggested that they thought it was maybe over the top, and they acknowledged that ATN had an emotional thing to it. The link to Logan and ATN was a play. And then even when they were discussing it, he says, I think he's doing this so that when we carve that out, because the healed no will probably want to carve it out, that he'll come in much lower. So we'll end up at a lower place. So I think they were maybe surprised, but I hope not overly so. It's hard to think of that full company and not think of that as being really one of the jewel in the crowns that he probably would want to go after.
That made perfect sense to me. And thinking back on the negotiations I've been involved with, I've always been the lawyer. So I've been required not to be emotionally invested, the dispassionate advocate or counselor. And so it made perfect sense to me that he would want that. It made perfect sense to me that he would do as you suggest, act like he wanted it to try to lower the overall price. And so I wasn't offended at all. But that really led to, and you hit it right on the head, the emotional component for Kendall and Roy. And then the whole discussion when they brought Shiv in, is this what dad wants? I don't care what dad wants. Dad ain't here and he ain't coming back. And I can't believe those guys would actually say, is this what dad? Now, they might say what he would do, but not what he would want. It's their company,
Yeah, I thought that
mostly.
dialogue was wild, but I do think that it was a heavy-handed episode on them trying to underscore that Logan has just this is still very fresh and they're still grieving a lot of this. And so that's the notes even when I was watching is that none of these negotiations, even though they end up seeming like they are being savvy, they all were driven by this emotional component that sort of ends up in the Roy's favor in some ways. But even down to the initial, I guess we can keep going sequentially about how this goes, but every one of these turns was actually an emotional decision that got Kendall and Roman get patted on the back for thinking it was some savvy move, but it was really them just having a knee-jerk, emotional, almost immature response every time.
And that really didn't surprise me because I thought that's what Kendall had wanted to do 2 episodes ago
Mm.
before Logan died. But after they do that, they do pose the question, did we just engage in an SEC violation? Because perhaps that's not in the shareholders' best interest. Nevertheless, they then flip to they want to end the deal, which leads to this fabulous scene on the mountaintop. So you want to
Yeah, I'm
give me
just
your thoughts there?
backing up just one moment before that when they decide to kill the deal again. That's entirely because Kendall gets mocked. He just gets just in front of everyone. Lucas calls him a tribute band. He gets dressed down in a way I think he's not used to. And sure enough, after that, he's we're not going to do this at all. And even he's trying to maybe have a justification for it, but he's just pissed. He got is embarrassed. And that becomes to me what I think is driving his character. And then he's able to convince Roman for maybe some other thing. But I think Roman's also mad at him. Is this guy? He's been punking us this whole time. They're mad. They don't like this guy. So then they go to the top of the mountain. You're right. With the idea that they're going to tank the deal and make it seem like it's not a company that's maybe doing that well, but say that in subtle ways. Talk about the problems with the major movie coming out, all these things that are like, we're not worried, but just want to be in the spirit of honesty. We should tell you there are all these sort of problems percolating up. It's a masterclass of looking at the various ways to handle a potentially hostile takeover. We saw this a little bit with Elon and Twitter, any number of takeovers, even if they start out initially as friendly, when there's a moment when maybe you want to walk away. But as you point out, that might be a fiduciary duty problem because the shareholders stand to make a lot of money on the deal. So you have to have a good reason why you're saying no to that share increase. And so they're trying to do that. So they're trying to say maybe this, they're trying to, not an actual poison pill, but trying to say you might not really know what you're getting. We have a few problems with our sort of flagship things coming out this summer. And then Roman just flips. Roman gets mad because Lucas makes fun of his dad one time too many. And again, a total emotional outburst that I think of the commentary we've seen since. Some people think that was all planned. I don't. I think that was just, these are people who are in the 0.1% of the world. They're not used to, I think, being treated this harshly, especially when they feel really emotionally raw. So sure, it ended up being a pretty amazing play, but I don't think it was intentional.
But that's a great point because it is an open question that many other commentators have suggested. I want to set up the scene a little bit more because I was really intrigued. Matson insults Logan again. Then he goes off to urinate. And that to me was a pretty good sign of what he thought of where they were at that point. But then Roman goes over and he's urinating against the wall. Roman jumps up on the wall next to him while he's urinating and goes into this soliloquy tirade. And it was, I don't know, 90 seconds, maybe 60 seconds of just some of the best dialogue you could have asked for, with some of the best acting you could have asked for. He was almost blowing spittle. He was into it, either mad or other. And so the dynamic of him having that tirade while someone's trying to urinate next to them, I found that really interesting. I still have an open question about whether he did that on purpose or not. He was clearly egged into it. But earlier on, I saw a couple of scenes where I thought Roman really elevated his business acumen. And I thought for the first time, I really saw him outshining his brother, particularly on analysis and thinking through and walking through the potential permutations of the deal. Although I think Kendall's the master of the minutia, and he can probably spit out figures down into the weeds better than anybody, but I'm not sure he really has that big picture. But that scene with Roman was just fabulous. I have thrown temper tantrums in negotiation. I have thrown temper tantrums in court. Almost always planned. Sometimes I pulled them off. Sometimes I didn't. But the times I got the most back, it surprised me because people really thought I was serious when I knew it was just an act. So it made me really think, is he elevated his game way past the checkers I saw before into a chess game, because the price he came back with was just I thought a very favorable price to waste our road coal, and he communicated it to Shiv. So why don't we talk about the other dynamic of the negotiation, which is in all plays into the misogyny part too, but he has a separate, not liaison, although maybe a mental liaison with Shiv, where he talks through some of his emotional baggage, his incredibly bizarre, I don't even know what you'd call it, activity of taking a half liter of blood once a month, freezing it and sending it to his sometimes paramour, sometimes estranged person who works for him.
Yeah.
That was just as weird as it gets, all the while doing cocaine and having a drink. Just another day at the office.
Yeah.
So what did you think of that scene?
That's it. It played into what we were seeing just before with the brothers deciding on their own and to not even let Shiv in on their plan to maybe tank the deal, which is, I think you start to see what we've seen in other seasons and certainly more poignantly in other episodes, this distrust among the siblings. And that is obviously came up when Shiv got iced out of the leadership last episode. And then that sort of is continuing. Although I did notice that on almost every scene, Roman or Kendall, one of them says, where's Shiv? Let's ask Shiv. Like they still are carving her in some places and recognize how important she is. But there definitely were moments, even in the beginning of the episode, where she says things like, I didn't get that email. Like she does seem floating amongst not knowing maybe her role. And so her sidling up to Mattson, or whichever direction that was going, him sidling up to her, was a weird scene for so many reasons. There's that we learn the discovery of his crazy whatever that is. And it maybe just is a play that like guys like that just get away with anything and just get increasingly crazier with what they think they could get away with. So I think Shiv sort of, let's not ever do that. And I think it might come back because it really is potential blackmail. Sort of, it's a problem because it's the employee angle. And so maybe that's going to come up as she knows a secret of his. But I don't know. But to your point about the misogyny, I thought that was just dripping through this episode. There's a lot of guys, I mean, down to literally urinating on a wall. Like it actually does seem everybody's checking out everything here. It's one of those measuring situations. But
Small hands, small hands.
so that the fact that like that she maybe will play a role in this other way. But even when he first sees her, he's, oh, I get a lawsuit if I hug you, which I mean, we're in 2023 and she's a very important, was interim CEO. Like it just, everything about it was this over the top acknowledgement that like these guys aren't gonna, it's still just the old boys kind of club and they're going to do the old boys kind of stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question. I just went on a rant about that, but I think that's probably going to come back around.
So when that scene initially started, I actually thought it was a job interview. I thought Mattson was going to use her to, one, see what information he could get, but also create a back channel that he could communicate to and from. But it evolved into what I really thought was an interview. And I was particularly struck by her remarks of capture and kill, because that, of course, came straight out of the Trump playbook. And that was how they were going to kill the Ebba story. I thought Shiv matched him line for line, word for word. I have to say I was a little put off that she appeared to be having a drink when she's 20 weeks pregnant. She did not use.
She was. I think she's hiding it. Because I don't know. That of course the Twitter sphere went nuts about that too. But
she did not use the cocaine, so I'm not going to fault her about that. Good kudos for that. But I thought she held her own in that scene, and I thought she passed. If that was a hiring test, I thought she passed, and he realized this is a woman gravitas. This is a woman who I can use, and this is a woman who, for riches, for backbone, for name, whatever reason, she will tell me the truth because she's done that. And then at the end, it really bookended to me when he called her on the plane.
Yeah.
To communicate the offer. But that really was a delicious scene. And Mattson just gets weirder and weirder. I was also intrigued by the company retreat.
Yeah.
Because it was in this setting. But I've been in a few of these M&A deals, and although you can have a merger of equals, you never can have a merger of equals. Somebody's going to get eaten. And I think the Waystar folks understand they're about to be eaten. Well, once again, as a lawyer, I'm not offended by that. That's the way the jungle works. And if you don't buy, you're going to be eaten. So the whole kill list at the end, but the whole play where the two cultures were around each other, they really were oil and vinegar, or whatever analogy you want to use. They're not going to work together, with some limited exceptions. What were your thoughts really on that whole dynamic?
Yeah, it might jump forward to a couple of my favorite lines, but I thought that was really funny. I know they weren't trying to be funny, but just that one at the brunch or whatever it is when they're meeting each other for the first time, and all of the subtle ways they're pretending to get along but digging at each other. It was humorous. And Tom still being slippery and trying to play both sides. All of it's an interesting situation, but you're right. There's no way that these two groups of people will get along.
I was surprised the Hugo character loaded up his plate with all that food. Now he got criticized for loading it up with carbs, but he really looked like the homeless person at the buffet. Let me just get one of everything.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then when Tom and Greg pulled their dynamic duo trick, and Greg Saunders over said, I read The Economist. Wow, you read The Economist? Wow. I thought that was a pretty good line, too. I have to say a few words about clothes
Yeah.
because I thought they took front and center in this. And I didn't realize that turtlenecks are a power clothing, but apparently they are. And there's a variety of turtlenecks. So Tom, I thought, really looked powerful and studly in a tight turtleneck, and he pulled it off, I thought, very well. Shiv had a little bit looser turtleneck, but I very much complimented her. I thought she looked great. The one that really struck me, though, as just the best was Jerry. She
Mm.
was dressed professionally while the rest of the old guard team looked like they were out for a snipe hunt, basically. And it was professional, tasteful, and powerful all at the same time. Mid-length to her knee skirt with a long auburn or perhaps brown coat. And I thought she looked great. I thought the outfit was great. Mattson, as you would expect, was in a bloody sweatshirt. Not bloody. He was in a sweatshirt that just looked like it had come out of yesterday's wash. Kendall was in his stupid baseball cap, looking Mickey Mouse-ish. Roman, I thought, looked sharp with nice slacks and a nice shirt. He's a good-looking guy, and that plays to that. But I really enjoyed the clothing on this, obviously.
Yeah, and then, like Nordic, all these guys in their elbow patches and their attempt to be business casual, but not at all, still needing a power kind of play. But yeah, and Mattson, when you first see him, he's actually has his hood up in like a
Yeah.
parka or something. You don't even actually see his face at first, which was, I'm sure, planned, but that was also just, you get a different sense from him.
So why don't we end up with some of the great quotes? We've talked about some of our favorites so far. I have to start with and you hit it on the head. I thought perhaps is the greatest insult of this entire series, which was, you guys are just a tribute band. And I thought that was, and it's Mattson says it to Roman and Kendall in the first round of negotiations. And I thought that was as cutting a line as I have heard. And the expression on Kendall's face, to his credit, he played it. And he showed the shock. He showed the dismay. I think he showed the hurt. And I just thought that was great.
It was great. It was right after he'd said that the company's just a parts shop or whatever. This idea that he was just going to slice and dice up all the different divisions of it. That was really impressive. I mean, in how cutting it was. You're right.
I thought Kendall had one of the great comebacks of Succession when Mattson says, I'm going to make you rich. And his response, I'm already rich. That was just, go Kendall. I'm going to be on Team Kendall now.
I know.
And it wasn't loud. It was almost under his breath. No, I'm already rich. I just love that one. So what are a couple of the ones you liked?
Oh gosh. I did the Hugo. What I thought was so funny about Hugo trying to talk to the guy who had been the ski jumper or something. He says, I heard you almost got a bronze. He says, that's almost huge. He's like, just those damn tenths of a second. But the funniest part of this line is he turns around and walks away. And Hugo's one who goes, what a dick. Like he's and the guy doesn't even say anything, he just smiles him. But even Hugo, who's the one being rude, turns around and is like, that guy. And I'm like, I thought that was great. Then of course, another line is on the plane over when Jerry describes that they're young and fit, but they're soft, they're European. She says something that, but like the line really is delivered on their European. She says something about their health care and social security, and we're the wolves here. It was the idea of that one, but I thought that was hilarious. They're soft, they're European, which when you see the people, I think that's why it's even funnier when you see them. They definitely don't seem very soft.
So I had a couple of more when Shiv is with Mattson. She says about Ebba, deniability is difficult given she has so much of your blood.
Yes.
I really like that one. Tom is apparently really insulted when he's called Tom of Siban. My
Hmm.
wife kept her name, and I'm often called Mr. Rudland. And I'm like, yeah, that's right, Mr. Rudland.
Hmm.
Oh, and a nod to all kids, all parents, all adults who used to be kids. Are you Scooby-Dooing me here?
Yeah. That was
From
great.
night all the way back to the 70s. I'm sure my 25-year-old daughter would smile if she heard that because she loves Scooby-Doo. In one of the great misogyny lines of all time, I think it's Matson says, Ebba's like an estrogen air freshener. I
Yeah,
cringed when I heard that. I was surprised you could even say that on television.
I know.
And just, wow. Any more lines that you really liked?
Now there was one in the beginning when which is very Kendall and Shiv. He says something like, "We're death wrestling with ogres here," and she just goes, "Kendall, you're reading documents," which felt like the summation of a lot of how we felt as lawyers, just being like, "No, we're doing this." Like, you're just reading some documents. That's all you're doing. Anyway,
So we end with, I think, a price of 197 a share,
192.
192 a share on the plane. Does the deal get done?
If it doesn't, they're gonna have to answer to their shareholders, certainly at that price. So no matter what, that's something that will likely have to go to the board. You'd have to have a really clever and I don't know how you get around not running that, of course, to the board, given that, and then how you would justify denying that offer. You're making yourself a target for all shareholder lawsuits at that point. So I think it does. I don't know. We shall see. There's gonna be some twists.
So I want to end with, I think it was in Slate Online Magazine. There was an article that this episode answered the elephant in the room question, which is, are any of these guys any smarter than any of us, or do all deals play out like this, which is complete chaos, either a plan that's no plan or no plan, and you execute on the no plan. But I thought Kendall and Roman really were reduced to not being geniuses in this episode, and they did react on the fly. I thought, or maybe even up to a B plus. But in terms of having a strategy and executing on that strategy, boy, this episode put that to rest.
Definitely. Definitely.
I can't wait to see where episode 6 takes us. 4 more to go.
I know. Same here. Thanks again, Tom. Always a pleasure.